Today on the Mr. Maple Show podcast, Matt and Tim count down the top 25 rare plants of 2023. Customer's choice.
Konnichiwa, y'all. We are the brothers that own MrMaple.com as well as Buckholz Nursery Wholesale, and we do a weekly podcast about plants. We've had a lot of really good interest in our Best of 2023 series we've been doing, so we're back with another installment of that.
Today, I'm Tim, and that's my brother Matt. We've got the top 25 rare plants of 2023. These are our top-selling plants, the Consumer Choice Awards. That aren't the conifers and aren't the maples.
Or the ginkgos. We did do a ginkgo list as well. Yeah, so we've eliminated ginkgos, maples, and conifers from this. It's the best of the rest, y'all. The best of the rest of 2023. Now, there's some very popular plants on here. Some of these plants would have beat some of the maples. Definitely would have beat some of the conifers. Definitely would have beat some of the ginkgos. So these are some of our top selling items. We're giving you a little bit behind the curtain here at Mr. Maple. We're showing you some of our top sales items. We call them the People's Choice Award because these are the ones you purchased in numbers in 2023. Let's dive into it.
Coming in at number 25, we've got Aelia Wabu.
This is a beautiful Satsuki azalea. Now, as you know, the Satsuki azaleas are very popular for bonsai. This one's no exception. It's got a great form for that. Typically going to work zone 7 through 9, so a little bit in those warmer zones, being an evergreen azalea. We do get by with them pretty occasionally here in zone 6 as well, so that is something that can work here occasionally. We do list them at zone 7, but I have certainly seen them in zone 6.
Now, Wabu has a nice coral pink flower. The blooms themselves can be about 2 inches to 2.5 inches in the actual bloom size. Now, when you see the term Satsuki, people often wonder, what does that mean? Well, for an azalea, it means it's going to be dense and compact. It means that it's going to be more of a summer type blooming azalea. Now, Satsuki is actually something that translates from Japanese. It actually translates literally as 5th month. And that's because typically the Satsuki azaleas bloom 30 days after the first day of spring. And Wabu does that in a phenomenal way with those coral pink flowers. It's just so beautiful. The Satsuki azaleas make an amazing bonsai because they stay tight, dense, and compact, and they have gorgeous large blossoms. And so, I mean, that's perfect for a bonsai, perfect for a container, but perfect for the small spots in the garden. Satsuki azaleas want a little more sunlight. That really increases the bloom count.
Yeah, that is a great plant for that late May kind of bloom, maybe in the 5th month where that name comes from. Typically at around 2 to 3 feet by about 2 to 3 feet wide in a 10-year period. Makes it a great grower, and that coral pink color makes it super highly sought after. So let's keep moving along. Here at number 24, we've got another rare plant for you. We've got Tyrax Tronus Fragrant Fountain. Now, this is a white weeping Japanese snowbell.
Yeah, this is a selection by our friend Crispin Silva. It has one of the most cascading habits of any of the Japanese snowbells. It's kind of like the Ryusen of the Japanese snowbells for those maple lovers out there. And the Japanese snowbells have these gorgeous white bell-shaped flowers that just dangle off of the branches. And with that weeping, graceful habit, Fragrant Fountain does this in a phenomenal way.
Yeah, I like to stake this one upwards for a little bit, kind of like Tim was mentioning with Ryusen, and then let it weep down from there. We do list it as 5 to 6 feet tall by about 5 feet wide. Now, it does need some staking to kind of get that central leader going to it. Phenomenal plant, and I think Styrax are heavily underused. You know, I was talking to Mina Malad the other day, and he's really interested in creating more of a fragrant garden and having that fragrance be a huge aspect of his gardening. Styrax are underrated, man. They're great Japanese plants. They fit in so well with Japanese maples and conifers. You get a flower. You also get this great fragrance going on in the garden. That sweet smell is just something extra that adds to everything else. Now, these are going to work zones 5 through 9, so pretty much anywhere you can be growing a Japanese maple, you know, Styrax tree works as well.
Coming at 23, we've got our very first dogwood on the list. We've got Cornus Alba, Little Rebel.
Yeah, this is a red twig dogwood. I was shocked to see it this high on the list. I knew we'd sold quite a few of them, but it kind of surprised me that it had climbed the list this far. And numerically, we typically list this one as 3 to 4 feet, even in 10 years. A lot of those red twig dogwoods can be a little bit more of a cutback shrub. So this one can be misleading because it will flush out very strongly each year when you cut it back. And I do recommend cutting back red twig dogwoods. This one is a great plant too for zone pushers. It's going to work zones 2 through 8. So a lot of areas can grow this, even in those colder places.
Now, one of the things I like about Little Rebel is it is one of the smallest of the red twig dogwoods. Gives you some good winter interest, but they multiply out at the base. So this is a tree that will end up getting about 3 to 4 feet in height and 3 to 4 foot in width in 10 years. But if you do a mass planting of these, you can really get that full effect of that red bark. Now, just like the Japanese maples, if you can give them a background, you can show off that red bark easier. An easy way to do this is to plant these red twig dogwoods on a bank. And if you do that, then you've got that backdrop of the bank, and you can contrast so well with the bark on the red twig dogwood. And Little Rebel, being it's one of the smallest of the red twig dogwoods, it fits in a lot of people's gardens.
All right, y'all, coming in here at number 22, we've got our first hydrangea on the list. That's Hydrangea Macrophylla Dancing Snow. The trademark name on that one is Wedding Gown. So you'll typically see it listed as Wedding Gown. We do a lot of hydrangeas. Tim and I, a couple years ago, were quite shocked. We were talking about expanding our hydrangea collection. We stopped and looked at all the numbers we were doing in hydrangeas, and we were just floored. We're like, okay, these are a pretty legitimate part of our year. And so we started to focus on bringing more diversity there, more interest. As you can guess with Wedding Gown, this one has a nice white bloom.
And it has more of that unique sort of lacy style bloom to it. And that's where it gets the name Wedding Gown. Just these really nice pure white blooms. While this is a phenomenal tree out in the garden and does fantastic out in the garden, it's also a really great tree to go out and cut flowers off and use this as cut flowers in your home, because these pure white blossoms are just so gorgeous, and hydrangeas can just be put into a vase, brought into your home, so you can really extend that garden inwards into your house.
Yeah, and I think that definitely plays into the popularity of this one. The fact that it is used as a cut flower for weddings a good bit. Hydrangeas, again, can be a cutback shrub. We typically list this one as 3 by 3, and it's going to work zones 5 through 9, so a very durable plant out there in the landscape. Beautiful bracts, beautiful flowers. This one really shows out, and it makes a great cut flower. So, I think a lot of the plants you're going to see here on this list have multi-uses, whether it be that smell or that cut flower aspect. They're popular for good reasons.
Coming at number 21, we've got Aelia Chinzan, and this is a unique azalea. The actual foliage is a little more pointed than many of your other Satsuki azaleas. Being a Satsuki azalea, like we mentioned before, it's really popular for bonsai. This particular tree, this particular azalea, was found as a sport on Osakazuki and was brought into the United States by our good friend Barry Yinger. Barry Yinger has brought over so many cool plants from Japan throughout the years. Oddly enough, now he's working with snake plant in Africa. And so he's done so many crazy plants and made plants available all around the world. And it's crazy to see, his name just reappearing on so many of the plants that we produce here at Mr. Maple.
Yeah, this one originated there at Cairo Nursery in Japan, and it was first introduced to Brookside Gardens there through Barry. There's some classic ones there. Now, Chinzan translates as rare mountain, so beautiful plant to be growing there. You can see as azaleas form, they form those mounding kind of clumps that kind of give that mountainous effect. This one is going to work zones 7 through 9, and it's also another one of those ones that's typically 2 to 3 feet tall by about 2 to 3 feet wide in a 10-year period. And really the deep pink flowering as a draw to this one. It's got a great color to it.
It really does. It's one of those deep pinks. It's just that intense pink color that grabs your attention out there in the landscape. So when Chinzan's blooming, you're attracted to it and you go up and check it out. Stays tight, dense, and compact, but those blooms make a big impact in the garden, even on such a small shrub. Again, give the Satsuki azaleas some sunlight to really increase your bloom pattern, and this is going to be one of those azaleas that blooms during those summer months.
No surprise to see that one there. All right, guys, we're breaking into the top 20 here for the rarest of the rest. We've got the other plants, not maples, not ginkgos, not conifers, that were the top sellers on Mr. Maple in 2023. It's always funny when a plant has another plant name in it. So we've got at number 20, Aelia Hardygardinia.
We're not talking about a gardenia. We're talking about azalea.
Yeah, a little misleading there. A double white flowering azalea.
Now, the reason I like this tree is it's a double hose and hose. It's a Linwood hybrid out of Linwood, New Jersey by Charles Fisher. And this is such a really cool bloom. It's a pure white, but it's a double white. And so it gives you a lot of presence in a small shrub. And that's one of the reasons why it's called Hardygardinia, because one, gardenias couldn't grow in a zone 6B where this can grow, 6B through 9. But at the same time, it's got a blossom that looks very much like a gardenia bloom.
Yeah, this one's going to be a little faster growing than some of the others there, at around 3 foot tall by about 4 foot wide in that 10-year span. Also some great large blooms. I mean, your blooms you're looking at on this one are 2.5 inches. So it's a good size flower, probably more reminiscent of that gardenia with being that larger size flower. But an overall great plant. Surprised to see this one is high up on the list too. Some of these shock me as we do them. I'm like, wow, I know we move a lot of these, but like all the way up to 20. That's pretty impressive.
Coming at number 19, we have Aelia Satsuki no Shimo. And this is one of my favorite azaleas.
I mean, honestly, I would have guessed this one was higher.
Yeah, I would have guessed this was much higher. It's one of my favorites because the foliage itself cups upward. And so this is a Satsuki azalea that almost has that Shishigashira effect on an azalea shrub. It's so awesome. On the foliage itself, when it's not blooming, it is an evergreen out there that is just outstanding. But when it is blooming, you have 2-inch pale pink blooms on top of that. And so this is such a fun Satsuki azalea to use out there in the landscape. One, for foliage texture, but two, gorgeous blooms as well.
I mean, we mentioned before, but the Satsuki azalea is very popular for bonsai. This one not only has, you know, the smaller stature, everything you want in that evergreen azalea for bonsai, but that cupped leaf. And I mean, it looks great for the foliage on a bonsai. That kind of pale pink flower is nice too. You kind of get some hints of lavender to white in there. Really gives it something overall. Typically, we're going to list this one as zone 7 through 9. Again, I have seen some of those push into zone 6. I've had decent success with them, but we do list them for their max cold hardiness. Now, the plant's typically going to be 3 foot by about 4 foot in that 10-year period as well. One of my all-time favorite azaleas, though. This thing's beautiful, and Tim described it as Shishigashira. It's a great way to describe it because it has that cupped, ridged look to it. So the foliage really has something extra, especially in a container or in a bonsai. Even when it's not in bloom, you're getting something a little more interesting going on with the foliage.
Now, a lot of our photos of Satsuki no Shimo and many of our azaleas that are in bonsai form came from a friend of ours, John O. Lee in Alabama. And he has just done phenomenal work with azaleas and bonsai. They're easy to train and do that because azaleas are extremely hardy. They're very acidic loving. They're very easy to train into a small pot. But when you do that, you get different bonsais throughout the season. You have one bonsai, which is the structure and the leaves of the plant. And then you have another azalea that's just phenomenal as that tree is blooming, it's starting to bloom. And then when it's in full bloom, your azalea has turned into just a gorgeous bloom set. And it's so fun that if you're looking to start out into bonsai, go ahead, grab you a Satsuki no Shimo, grab you a Satsuki azalea that you like the bloom of, and start with one of those because they are an outstanding beginner bonsai.
All right, coming in here at number 18, we got another hydrangea. Like I mentioned, hydrangeas do make up a big part of our year sometimes. We've got Hydrangea Paniculata, which I love the paniculatas. They had something a little different. Early evolution. Now, this one's popular for being extremely compact, extremely dense, very full and thick, but in a very small habit to it. I love what this one brings from its chartreuses to pinks to light greens to whites, all in the same flower pattern there. Really just adds a ton to the garden.
Now, the Hydrangea Paniculatas, those are the plants that they do well out here for us in acidic soil. But for those people who have a more alkaline soil in the Midwest, Hydrangea Paniculatas are extremely tolerant of that more alkaline soil. So you can have gorgeous blooming hydrangeas, some gorgeous white blooms out there in that Midwest setting with these panicle hydrangeas. And the panicle hydrangeas have that longer panicle-like bloom to them. Gorgeous whites that you could just really enjoy zones 3 through 8.
Yeah, this is a great plant. Being it more compact, this one really fits in well in the containers. It's a hydrangea that works great as a cut flower, but it really looks exceptional in small planters. I mean, it looks really nice. That density to it is really what brings it, that foliage density and everything. It just looks perfect in a big patio planter or a small pot.
Coming at number 17, it's one of my favorite azaleas. We've got Aelia Tojo, and this is a Satsuki azalea. The bloom itself is much thinner on each of the blossoms on this bloom. It has a very unique and distinctive blossom to the Satsuki azalea that stands out from any of the other azaleas that we grow. It's one that's extremely popular for bonsai. But the other reason why this shrub is extremely popular is that bloom continues on throughout the season. And those blooms stay on this azalea sometimes even until November. But the unique thing is that the red color of the blossoms starts changing to green at that point. So you can get some real crazy colors on these blooms. A fun azalea to do as a bonsai.
Yeah, this one's going to work 7 through 9. We've heard that Tojo means treasure of activity, and with all that flowering content, it makes sense why it'd be a treasure of activity because it just keeps bringing it. It changes. It has a lot going on. Typically, this one is 2 feet tall, 3 feet wide. Really great one, and just continues to bring it with that flower. I like that early color, that bright kind of picked up red. It's almost a tropical looking red you get. I think of it with like tropical flowers look to it. Really showy, shows out in the landscape and garden, and no surprise to see that one coming in here at number 17. All right, guys, at number 16, we've got another tree form making the list. We've got Stewartia monadelpha. Now, this is the orange bark Stewartia. Excellent tree form to be growing. Not even a cultivar here, just a straight species. These work zones 6 through 8, and they make phenomenal plants.
When I think of Stewartia monadelpha now, I think of walking through Longwood Gardens and seeing the gorgeous Stewartia they have there. They've got some gorgeous Stewartia monadelpha, and Stewartia monadelpha is one of those plants that brings it each and every season. You've got white blossoms that are almost camellia-like. You've got bark interest that's almost crepe myrtle-like, where you've got gray splotching and cinnamon splotching and sort of cream brown splotching in there all together on the bark that's sort of exfoliating. And then you've got fall colors, and the fall colors can just be some vivid yellow oranges.
It's an excellent all-around plant. Stewartia are underutilized as well in the landscape like the Tyrax. They're a part of that woody ornamental category that sometimes gets overlooked with Japanese maples and conifers. They're a great plant to be adding color interest, flower interest, and bark interest, foliage interest. I mean, they just keep bringing it. When I think of this one, though, I do think of Fuji Shidari. I paid a lot for a Fuji Shidari from Talon. It's a weeping form of this. We will be offering more of it. So I bought the second biggest one in existence. It's actually in my garden now. And now, since we bought Buckholz Nursery, we have the biggest one. So I should have just held on, right? We have the biggest one there in Buckholz Gardens, where we have the larger Fuji Shidari. That is something we'll be offering more of, a weeping form of orange bark Stewartia. The straight species, though, a darn good plant, underrated in its uses.
And the original name on that Fuji Shidari was Shibamichi Weeping. At least that's what a lot of people knew it as, because it came through Mr. Shibamichi in Japan, who we got to go visit in our last trip to Japan. And it has that weeping habit. Stewartia monadelpha, though, is typically a nice upright tree out there, and it's going to make an excellent tree with flowering interest, bark interest, and fall color. Coming in at number 15, we've got OSmananthus fragrans, Yenbi Shuanghui.
Another great plant for smells and fragrance in the garden. This is a very fragrant tea olive or sweet olive, so you've got that fragrance going on that really pushes that smell. I love this one. It's an introduction by our friend Ted Stevens. He brought this one in the U.S. That variegation, though, is just out of this world. Anytime you're getting something that variegated and you're getting extra benefits like a fragrance in the garden, it just seems like something that has a lot going on.
I remember Mark Wellington being like, guys, you got to check this out. Look what we've got back here in the back greenhouse. And then we were down in Texas visiting Dr. Creech. He was like, guys, check out this OSmananthus fragrance. You got to check this out. And it's a variegated OSmananthus fragrance. So it's everything you love about OSmananthus fragrance, but then you have a white creamy border on a blue centered leaf, like a blue-green leaf. It is outstanding in every regards. of its actual variegation. It is a phenomenal bloomer as well. It blooms in almost every month that has the letter R in it. And
to use some of Ted's jokes.
Yeah, to use some of Ted's jokes. It is an outstanding tree. It's a zone 7 through 10 plant. If you can give this some protection where it's not going to get, those cold winter winds, you can actually push this a little bit further into zone 6 as well. But this is just such a phenomenal and outstanding variegated osmanthus fragrance. Sweet olives, they're one of those plants that are just classic in the southern garden. When they're in bloom, you can smell them from 100 yards away. You can walk into a greenhouse that has one plant blooming, and you're like, where's that plant? Because the osmanthus fragrance gives such a nice, sweet fragrance out there in the garden. It just adds that extra dimension.
Yeah, really interesting plants. This one was brought back from China by Ted Stevens. Shout out to Ted Stevens. We'll have to try to get him on the podcast at some point. Retired this year from Nurseries Caroliniana. Great friend of ours. We were actually going to travel with him to Japan a few years ago. The whole pandemic thing happened, so we were literally sitting there calling up Ted going, let's hold off on those tickets till this 14 days is over. And then, of course, that turned into not as much travel for a while. But we were really excited to possibly go to Japan with Ted one day. He's been traveling Japan for, 40, 50 years, collecting cool plants. And he was really excited about going with us because the prospect that Tim and I drive in Japan, so we could get him to a lot more places than you can get to on the train system. But just a fascinating plant guy. We used to do a lot of trade shows and garden shows with Ted, and we would just sit down and talk plants all day. That was one of our favorite things to do. So shout out to Ted Stevens for introducing this amazing variegated plant. Now consider this one a little bit more of a tree form. This is going to be a plant that grows, more like 8 feet tall by 5 feet wide, and it is going to work in those hotter ranges. So this is one that's going to be more of a 7 through 10. Now we have done some weird stuff here at our nursery. We have actually grafted this one onto Chionanthus retussus before and had success growing it on Chinese French tree.
It's interesting that, osmanthus fragrance can graft onto Chionanthus retussus, and that also means it can graft onto Fraxinus. And there's just some weird things that are going on there, that you have evergreens that are grafted onto deciduous plants. I mean, it's funky. You don't ever think that can actually happen.
Very interesting stuff going on there. All right, let's keep going on our list. We're down to number 14. We've got Hydrangea Macrophylla Zorro.
Now, this is an interesting hydrangea. It has black stemming, and in more acidic soil, this one really has a nice deep purple blue bloom to it. Like this blue purple that is outstanding. Looks almost like a metallic kind of sheen to it. It's really one of the darker lace caps that are on black stems. And that black stem is just sort of like a designer azalea. I mean, that black stemming just allows you to really see the full color of the bloom. They're great for cut flowers as well. The black stemming hydrangeas are now they're in fashion right now for hydrangeas. They're some of the coolest and most unique hydrangeas are those black stemming ones.
Yeah, because this one has that black stem and some of the darkest blue shades you'll see on any of the landscape hydrangeas. This one's highly sought after, obviously for cut flowers, but also just for that landscape look to it. Great plant, typically around 4 foot tall, by about 5 foot wide. Again, it can be more of a cutback shrub being a Hydrangea Macrophylla. And this one's going to work pretty much anywhere you can grow Japanese maples as well. So this one's going to work more in that zones 5 through 9.
Coming in at number 13, we have Osmanthus heterophyllus Sheehan, also known as party lights, and that is one darn colorful false holly.
Yeah, another great plant for fragrance. You can get those late fall fragrances on your Osmanthus heterophyllus. They're really great plants. Now, party lights, it brings it, man, for the color. This one is cartoonish in its colorations. You can get yellows and oranges and sometimes even a little bit of hints of red going on in that new growth. Now, you do want to give this one early morning sun at least to pick those colors up. It's a tree that's going to work zone 6 through 9, so it won't quite get down to you zone 5 people, but it is a phenomenal false holly, especially for that spring interest and that color display that it brings.
Now, while the trademark name is Party Lights, the untrademarked name is Sheehan, and that does translate as smoke. This tree is just outstanding on the colors it provides and in the fragrance it can provide in the garden. It does have that false holly leaf to it. That is an Osmanthus heterophyllus, so it will look like a holly bush out there, but it's going to be one of those plants that just gives you continuous color, evergreen interest, and some good fragrance in the garden.
Excellent plant, typically right at 5 foot tall, but about 4 foot wide. Does tend to have more of a globular shape to it as well as they develop. You certainly can trim those for shape, but it does tend to be more of a ball shape as it fills out. All around, just a great plant to be growing. Makes a great border. If you want to mass plant these as a border, it looks phenomenal. It's a great way to close off a small area and have a small area hedge. Absolutely one of the most colorful false hollies you'll ever see.
Coming up at number 12, we have Hydrangea Macrophylla Stargazer.
It surprises me. I think if you did this list last year, you'd see a very different set of hydrangeas. Our hydrangeas are always popular here at Mr. Maple. We do a lot of them. You'd be shocked how many hydrangeas we move. It's a little shocking to me how quickly the names change. So these have been very popular, but you might have saw a different set of even Macrophylla last year that are on this list. Love them though. They're going to work zones 5 through 9. And the Stargazer, absolutely beautiful, double blooming hydrangea.
And this tree has double blooms on the blossoms themselves. So you've got little blooms that make up the larger bloom on a hydrangea. And each of the little blooms are doubled. But then you also have a variegation going on the bloom itself, where you've got a pink, almost interior part of the leaf and a creamy white bordered edge to that bloom. And when you do that, you've got this amazing, really just phenomenal display on that full blossom. It is extremely showy. It is one of the more showy blossoms that we do. This is from some of the breeders in Japan that brought us some other amazing selections of hydrangeas. And Stargazer, a 4 foot by 5 foot shrub out there with just gorgeous blooms. It's a no-brainer that came in at number 12.
All right, here to number 11, we've got another azalea. As you can guess, azaleas have been very popular on our best of the rest list. We've got Azalea Aelia Rose. Now, this is a double pink aromi lavender flowering azalea.
Now, Dr. Eugene Aromi really worked on trying to get double blooms on a lot of azaleas that would perform extremely well in high humidity of Alabama. He was one of the just most outstanding breeders out there. And Eugene Aromi developed Aelia Rose, named after one of his granddaughters. It's a zone 6B through zone 9 plant. And it just makes this large shrub out there that looks like purple roses in the garden on a double blooming azalea. It's fragrant. I mean, there's not much more you can ask for than Aelia Rose. And it's one of the most purple blooming of the azaleas that we do.
Yeah, well, one great quality this one has also is its sun tolerant. So it's been excellent for sun tolerance in high heat zones. Again, slightly more cold tolerant than many of the other evergreen azaleas. Typically a 6x6, so a little faster growing, but that durability, what a great factor to have there. It's got a little bit of everything you want in an azalea. I mean, it's just got that showy factor to it. No surprise to see this one creeping in here. Now, guys, we are all the way down to our top 10 on the best of the rest.
Coming at number 10, we've got Hydrangea quercifolia Ruby Slippers. And Ruby Slippers is a dwarf compact oak leaf hydrangea. Now, I love the oak leaf hydrangeas. The foliage itself look like oak leaves. And so you get this really sharp looking foliage on a hydrangea. So the foliage itself is outstanding. But on Ruby Slippers, what you get is large blooms. And they start out white. And then as those blooms mature, which they mature fairly quickly, you start to get ruby red colors on those blossoms. And it is just an outstanding, compact, dense oak leaf hydrangea.
This one was developed by the National Arboretum. Shout out to Richard Olson. That's another Dr. Richard Olson. We'll have to get him on the podcast at some point. Another good friend of ours. I first saw this plant at Dawn Shadows. Dawn was just freaking out about it really early on. He had some of these in production. He made sure to get us at least one of each of that Ruby series there going on. And I love oak leaf hydrangeas. They just look amazing. They've got, such interesting foliage that the foliage has just everything you want going on. And it can't be understated enough that this one is a plant that works zones 5 through 9. That's probably a big part of its popularity. It's able to go to colder zones. It's able to go to warmer zones. It's going to fit a lot of needs for a lot of gardens.
Now, one of the things I love about the oak leaf hydrangeas is those leaves, they're a little bit thicker than your typical hydrangea leaf. They can also give you some phenomenal fall colors on the foliage itself. And Ruby Slippers does that in a great way. Coming at number 9, we've got Tyrax Japonicus Evening Light.
This red leaf Japanese Snowbell is probably my second favorite plant on this list. I love how dark this is. I love putting this out in the garden around yellows. Obviously, we always talk a lot about yellows contrasting, but Evening Light can give you some of the darkest shades, I feel like, in the garden. So it's such a good backdrop for so many other colorful plants. Doing a ton of colorful plants here at Mr. Maple. This one's just a dream because the flowering content, the foliage it gets, I think the foliage is just impeccable. I love the color shade it gets. It's almost a black. Like, I've had this in the garden get so dark. This one's going to work zones 5 through 9. Again, making more of a tree form, and it's durable as all get out. I absolutely love the texture and color this one provides. You know, the flowers for this one are just a bonus.
And this one, there's not that many purple leaf plants out there. I mean, you're maybe familiar with Japanese maples, but other than that, there's not a lot of purple plants out there. And this one gives you that purple-black color out there in the garden with a nice upright form. Gorgeous snowbells hanging off of this and good fragrance in the garden. The Japanese snowbells just help bring that essence of Japan to your garden. And this one does this in a really cool way. Pair this out there with something that's lighter colored on the foliage, and you're going to really make a good dynamic out there. Something like a Dragon Master or a Summer Gold really contrasts well against that dark fall.
Yeah, this one's typically 6 foot tall, but about 4 foot wide in 10 years. Like throwing a lot of heights and zones on this podcast for you guys. I know a lot of y'all are used to maples, and so many of our maples work zones 5 through 9 or 6 through 9 with the coral barks. It's pretty easy to figure out where they work. So with this kind of podcast, we want to just go a little bit more detailed into that information. All right, coming in here at number 8, we've got Aelia Heno Crimson. Now, this is one of the quintessential red flowering Kurume azaleas. It is a beautiful plant. One thing I love about this is the foliage as well as the bloom can just keep getting smaller. So it's always very popular for bonsai.
Now, with each style of azalea, there's often like a father of different types of azaleas. And oddly enough, the father of Kurume azaleas, the guy who did the most breeding work, who made these things popular, was a samurai. So, I mean, how much more manly can you get than being a samurai and then going through and selecting different Kurume azaleas? That's pretty cool. Now, Heno Crimson, with the reason why Kurume azaleas are so popular is they bloom so prolifically that you often don't see the leaves when the blossoms come out. And so the entire shrub will be the color of the blooms. Now with Heno Crimson, you get a nice crimson red color on this azalea. It is outstanding. And being a Kurume azalea, it's pretty hardy. I mean, they can go to zone 6 through 8, so you can take an evergreen azalea down to a colder zone, and you can have that red shrub out there in the spring that's just brilliant on its colors on the blossoms.
This one's so popular for so many reasons. Again, zone 6, so it can go a little bit further down than many of the others. I think it is one of the best for bonsai. It also has a very dense habit to it. That density to it makes it look phenomenal. And then when you get it covered in flowers, like Tim was mentioning, the flowers can erase the foliage almost for a little while. You just see all flowering. The color's spectacular on it. And that smaller overall stature at 3 feet tall, but about 4 feet wide in the landscape. It's so compact, so dense. Perfect azalea if you want to get into bonsai. That one may be my favorite.
Coming at number 7, we've got a hydrangea again, guys. We've got Hydrangea macrophylla, Aelia Dreaming. And this one, when you look at the blossoms, you are going to be dreaming. It's one of those hydrangeas that has pink blossoms on it, purple blossoms, blue blossoms. It's got a multitude of colors on the blossoms on this hydrangea. And that's why it was selected, is because it can throw on all these different colors, not just pink, not just blue. Typically, most hydrangeas, if you give them in more alkaline soil, you have more of a pink color on the blossom. And if you give them more acidic soil, you can have more of a blue blossom. And you can adjust this by putting out things like different types of fertilizers that can give it more of that acidic soil based, or you can actually give it more lime, which will actually take it more on that alkaline side. So you can adjust the colors on many hydrangeas. This one throws that multitude of color on the blooms all by itself, and so the blossoms look crazy because of all the different colors you get on this hydrangea.
John Bacale hybridized this one and named it after his daughter. The untrademarked name is Lindsay Ann. La Dreaming, though, it sells out. I don't even know what color you call this. Tim tried to describe the colors. Maybe one of your favorite blues, maybe one of your favorite purples, maybe one. I mean, it's got white going on there. It's got pink. There's so many different colors going on in this one. You know, the pH can affect the colors a good bit in hydrangeas, but when you get this one just right, it is one of those showstopper plants. Again, tough as nails. This is an easy hydrangea to grow. It's going to work zones 5B through zone 9, so it's a wide range of plants, wide range of zones there. Typically at 3 foot by 4 foot wide. Again, azaleas can be cut back shrubs, especially Hydrangea macrophylla, so you can affect the shape a little bit there as well. But this is one that's going to give you cut flower interest. It's going to give you incredible diversity of contrast, even within itself, especially with those blooms.
Coming at number 6, we've got a liquid ambar. We've got Slender Silhouette. This is a selection by our good friend Don Shadow and mentor, who we learned a lot about plants from. Matt and I used to go and just visit Don and try to be sponges and soak up all the information. He had original writings where he had written so many of the original maple founding fathers in the United States.
He had letters to Henry Holman when he was like 13. He's like, here's where I wrote him when I was 13, and he sent me back a thing and said, keep it up, kid. It's just cool stuff like that. I mean, it was so much fun.
That's insane. And so we all would always try to go and soak up information from him. Well, Slender Silhouette was a sweet gum that was found along the sides of a railroad track. And literally, it just has this tall, narrow shape, so it fits in so many places. And being a sweet gum, it's hardy, it's easy to use as a landscape tree. And you're starting to see this tree more and more all across the world.
This may be the fastest columnar plant in growth. That's probably one of the big appeals to it. I mean, it's not uncommon in 10, 15 years for this tree to be over 30 feet tall and no more than about 3 feet wide. So, I mean, it takes off for a columnar plant. I've seen it used as a border. I've seen it at Michael Steinhardt's garden used as, you know, like a screening plant where they planted 10 big ones together. It's an interesting plant for so many reasons. It works zones 5 through 9. It's sun tolerant as all get out. It can handle extreme heats, with little leaf burn. Pretty good fall color on it too for a sweet gum. I mean, you get some yellows and oranges going on in this in the fall. I know I always take videos of the ones at the North Carolina Arboretum out here. They put Christmas lights and wrap those things all the way up. Those trees are probably closer to 50 feet now at the North Carolina Arboretum. And they'll put, check out the winter interest on these, these liquid ambar Slender Silhouettes because they've got all the lights going on. But goofy to say, but it also speaks to the durability of the plant, that it can handle that, that being wrapped up in Christmas lights that long. They're just tough as nails. That's why they're so popular. But I do think that growth rate is really, a big added advantage that they take off. Not only is it columnar, it's extremely fast growing in columnar.
Now, Sean and I recently did a walkthrough this past fall of the Paul Senior Botanical Garden that's coming up soon on the Mr. Maple Show on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. There are just so many fun ways to use this plant. And sometimes they use these going down a walkway to just basically make this almost like room of the walkway using the Slender Silhouettes.
I love when gardens have rooms. I mean, it's done a lot in Chinese garden. You walk through a moon door. You'll actually have physical walls sometimes in a Chinese garden. And I think you're onto something, because a great way to create that same aesthetic is walling it off. You've got the vertical interest going on, and you could get some big Slender Silhouettes fast. So you get this room effect early on.
And another fun way to do this is to have it flanking both sides of an entrance to a garden. It's a very formal English style gardens often do that. And with Slender Silhouette, you can do that with, instead of using big posts or big, statues, you can do that with Slender Silhouette. So many fun ways to use this plant, because that vertical interest draws everyone's eye up. And the way this tree is so tall and so narrow, it adds drama to the garden, gives a good fall color, typically giving some nice oranges and reds in the fall as well. An easy tree for many people to grow, and a tree it's fun to use out there in the garden.
Makes a great accompaniment to maples. No surprise it's here on Mr. Maple that popular. Guys, we're all the way into our top 5. So give us your guesses of your top 5 sales plants, the People's Choice Awards. These are the ones you guys picked. They were the top sales that weren't maples, ginkgos, or conifers here on Mr. Maple for 2023. Now, coming in here at number 5, we've got my favorite hydrangea. There's one that beat it. I couldn't believe that. But my favorite hydrangea, Hydrangea macrophylla Miss Sayori. This one just has everything you want in a hydrangea. The dark foliage, the flowers. I mean, it's got every single thing I want. It's my all-time favorite hydrangea. Works zones 5 through 9 as well, so its durability can be exceptional, making it go more zones. You'll notice a lot of our plants that are very popular go more places. That makes a lot of sense as well. This fits anywhere you can put a Japanese maple. It's a shade-loving plant, but if you can give this one early morning sun, you can get some really dark foliage on there that makes the perfect palette for those pink flowers.
Now, this has dark foliage, so it's going to give you some of that purple-black foliage, and it's got a variegated double bloom as well. And so you get this pink-red blossom with light pink variegation that is just outstanding on the bloom. The pinks and whites that are just wow factor. And then on that dark foliage gives that a backdrop to really show off on the blossoms itself. It is just one of those plants that will grab your attention. Now, this plant, when it's first getting established, will throw small blossoms out. As this shrub gets more established out in the landscape, those blooms get bigger and bigger. And it's a photographer's delight. You can go out there and take 1 billion photographs of this, and people are just going to be awestruck by how beautiful it is, because it's so easy to capture the beauty because of how beautiful the blooms are on Miss Saori.
Because of the foliage and the bloom, I like this one for a big container. You're going to get enough drama, you're going to get enough interest that you really don't need anything else in your planter. I mean, Miss Saori, you can put that in a patio planter and you're done. I mean, it's got everything you want going on. Foliage, blooms. I mean, just phenomenal plant. Cutback shrub again. So we say 3x4, but you can obviously maintain this one smaller, being a Hydrangea macrophylla. Absolutely outstanding plant. I can't say enough things about it. Probably my favorite hydrangea we've offered if I had to pick one.
Coming in number 4, we've got a huckleberry bush coming in called Buried Treasure.
I'm your huckleberry.
You notice I didn't try to say the species name on that one.
Oh, it is a mouthful, dude. I was leaving that one for you. I don't even know how in the world. Yeah, we'll let a botanist explain that one. I was shocked to see Buried Treasure Huckleberry Bush at number 4 in our sales list for 2023. That is a shocker to me. I know its compact nature is a big factor in that. I mean, this is a 1-footer by 3-foot wide huckleberry bush. A lot of people like to grow some planters. It's going to work zones 5 through 9. So, you know, the durability and the size are certainly factors, but it still shocked me to see this beat Miss Saori. I mean, wow, that's crazy.
Now, it's got boxwood-like foliage to it, so it is quite attractive out there, and it does get berries on it that are sweet to taste. And so it gives you that edible ornamental out there that we don't offer that many of. And so it grabs people's attention as something unique and different. And I am shocked to see it at number 4, but it is a really cool plant.
It says people will use the flavors to accentuate pancakes, jam, ice cream, juice, candy muffins, and much more. So it is one of those edible ornamental plants. I love edible ornamentals. We got to bring back more cornelian cherry dogwoods for sure. Those are often popular in jams as well. Absolutely useful plant. So that probably picks it up there a little bit on the list, that it has some, tasty quality.
Tasty. I like it. Coming in at number 3, we've got Hydrangea quercifolia Little Honey. And y'all know I love yellow. Y'all do too, because this is one of our top hydrangeas on this list. Hydrangea quercifolia Little Honey is a small, compact hydrangea, 2 feet in height, 4 foot in width, and 10 years. It's got those oak leaves that we talk about, but these are yellow. These are yellow, and it's got white blossoms on top of that. Guys, this is such a cool oak leaf hydrangea.
A perfect pairing with Miss Saori. So if you saw our last hydrangea on the list, the yellows of the foliage here with the dark reds of that foliage make just a perfect pairing. It's going to work zones 5B through 9. We do list it as a little bit smaller. It does get back, a cutback shrub as well, being an oak leaf hydrangea, but 2 foot by 4 foot. The thing here is that foliage. That foliage is so attractive. You see this one with that bright yellow that it displays, especially in the early spring. There's so many great places for this one in the garden, and it just contrasts with everything and gives you that spark of color going on. It's so unique for a hydrangea to have that shade.
And there's nothing else quite like it, and that's the reason I love it. It just gives you a splash of color even there when it's not blooming, and then when it blooms, you get that additional interest out there with these long white blossoms that are famous for the oak leaf hydrangeas. Little honey, rock star in the garden. If you don't have it, you need to go get it.
All right, y'all, we're all the way up to number 2, and it is Pieris japonica Flame and Silver. Another rock star in the garden. This is a Japanese Andromeda that just puts on some weird color displays. I love what this one does. It can get unreal for the silvery color, the red color, just everything going on this one. It looks photoshopped. It's a plant I think a lot of people enjoy because it looks like you took this one and you ran it through just complete Photoshop and turned the colors up to 11 because it just looks weird.
Well, I love the Japanese Andromeda because they do so well out in the Japanese garden. They provide a plant that gives you this evergreen interest. They give you some blossoms on top of that. And it just has an interesting shape to the actual shrub. It just adds that ornamental Japanese feel out there in the garden. You know, in slightly shadier situations, they do well. They can handle some sun too here in Western North Carolina. They're fun all the way around. With Flaming Silver, you get everything you love about the Japanese Andromeda, but then you also get variegation. And the variegation is outstanding. It's that silver white color around that green blue centered leaf. New growth flushes start out with Flaming Silver as a bright pink, and it's outstanding. And then that turns to the variegation, but as it's turning to that variegation, you get that silver hue that gives this tree its name, the Flaming Silver. And when you see a large Flaming Silver out in the landscape or a small one, and it's got all this new growth all across it, you're just awestruck because it looks like blooms out there, but it's this shiny, glossy silver sheen. And that's what you get with Flaming Silver.
Beautiful plant. I mean, the older growth, it's understated. It's got like a white border on a green leaf. You know, this is a flowering plant, so it does have a fragrant flower to it as well. But for me, forget about all that. That green and white with suddenly this neon hot poker pink. You know, it's insane how pink the new growth is on top of that. It's like a metallic-y pink going on top of this one. Flaming Silver, just a great plant. Zones 5 through 8. We listed as 4 foot by 5 foot in 10 years. I certainly could get a little bit larger with some age to it. Always popular here on Mr. Maple, one we offer a good bit.
And guys, we've made it down to number 1. You got any guesses on what number 1 is?
Would you guess it was a native plant?
Maybe a native R?
When someone says, hey, do you sell natives? I'm going to say, did you know our number 1 selling plant that isn't a Japanese maple conifer or ginkgo is a native plant?
They would be shocked.
I think they might be.
Guys, coming in number 1, we've got Hamamelis virginiana Little Prospect.
This is a fun native R. A native R is a cultivar of a native, but it is a native plant, so you get all those benefits of having a native plant. You know, witch hazels are native here in Western North Carolina. You see them a good bit. I always see them when I'm hiking up Looking Glass Falls area, that area. There's a ton of great native witch hazels in Pisgah National Forest. So this one is a fall flowering yellow bloom style. But guys, the variegation on this one has all the flash of any woody ornamental you can want. And that's what I love. I love when a native plant is a native, but it competes with any woody ornamental.
The thing I love about Little Prospect is witch hazels are known for not having the best foliage late in the season. Their foliage sometimes hangs on a little bit and doesn't look as very desirable. And that's not at all the case with Hamamelis virginiana Little Prospect. With Little Prospect, you have crisp foliage late in the season that can handle full sun. This is a selection from Tennessee that can handle full sun. It has a pyramidal shape, so it's got a phenomenal shape to it as well. And on top of having, you know, being a fantastic witch hazel, on top of being a November blooming witch hazel that has yellow blossoms that are fragrant and sweet, and having phenomenal foliage, that's variegated on top of that.
It's a showstopper of variegation too. You can put this one out next to Geisha Gone Wild, Japanese maple, and the pairing will not be lost. I mean, it is one of those trees that can hold its own with anything. Yellow on almost blue-green to dark emerald green. The colors are phenomenal, and I mean, they just show out. They really show up against anything you want to pair it with.
All around, this is by far one of my favorite witch hazels we do, and it is outstanding in every regards. If you're wanting something that's flashy and variegated, this is an awesome plant to put out there. And guys, it's a native plant too, so you can fulfill some of those native plant needs out there in the garden with the witch hazel, but it's one that does it in such a dramatic and awesome fashion.
This one's going to work zones 3 through 8. We do list it as 6x6 in 10 years. Hey, did you know the #1 selling plant on Mr. Maple that isn't a maple, a ginkgo, or a conifer happens to be a native plant? I think that one might have shocked a few people. I hope you've enjoyed this best of the rest list. We've been breaking down our favorite overall plants that you guys picked. These are not our favorite, but they're actually just your favorite. These are the Customer Choice Awards for 2023. We're giving you the behind-the-scenes look, and they are some of Tim and I's favorite, too. We do curate this list, so we did pick these for a good reason and offer them for a good reason. They got Tim and I excited, and you guys reciprocated that by making them the top choices.
Take care,
God bless,
and have a great day.